his throat cut and survived.
Couldn't he have done something nice?
Joe E. Lewis got his throat cut and survived. Lewis was a Chicago entertainer who sang songs and told jokes in nightclubs in the days of Al Capone. He worked the Green Mill Cocktail Lounge for $650 a week. The club was owned by an ex-prize fighter called Machine Gun Jack McGurn. McGurn worked for Al Capone. Many myths followed McGurn around. He was thought to have caught Capone's attention when he shot the 3 killers that had murdered his father. McGurn was believed to have been one of the men that organised the St. Valentine's Day massacre. Joey Lewis got his throat cut because he was offered double what he was being paid at the Green Mill to perform at the Rendezvous Cafe. And Lewis was a gentleman about it and told McGurn that once his contract had expired, he would be moving on. McGurn told Lewis that if he left the Green Mill, he would kill him. Lewis left anyway. Business suffered badly at the Green Mill once Lewis had gone. Now, Joey Lewis was not a martyr to art or principle. He was a pragmatic mercenary with balls of steel. The new Rendezvous was owned by a rival gang. Lewis had exchanged one lucrative Faustian contract for another and must have expected a degree of physical protection from his new paymasters. He took precautions regardless. On $1,000 a week plus a percentage of club revenue, Lewis could afford his own bodyguard. Nothing happened for a while, and after a while, Lewis must have believed that he was in the clear and that McGurn's threats had been necessary bluster. Besides, Capone had always been a fan, despite the entertainer's breach of etiquette. Now, Lewis must have believed he was in the clear, as there was no bodyguard present when Jack McGurn and 2 of his men visited Lewis's hotel room sometime in November 1927. Of the 4 men who got their throats cut and survived, Joey Lewis's assault is the one for which there is the most forensic detail available. Lewis's attackers knocked on the door. Lewis was asleep. The knocking woke him up. He answered the door sleep-drunk and unprepared. The 3 men walked right in. One of the men ordered Lewis to keep quiet. 2 of them beat Lewis across the head with their guns. As Lewis fell, he was caught and kept in a standing position, while Jack McGurn cut his throat with a hunting knife. If the intention was to mutilate Lewis, then McGurn did a good job. In cutting Lewis's throat, he managed to remove a piece of his tongue. If McGurn's intention was to murder Lewis in a demonstrable fashion, the assault was a bloody mess. Joey Lewis got his throat cut and survived. McGurn and his gun thugs left Lewis in his hotel room. Lewis dragged himself into the hallway. At some point, the chambermaid arrived. Now, Lewis must have been one of those comedians that didn't know how to switch it off, because it took a while for the chambermaid to realise that Lewis was not clowning around and call for an ambulance. Al Capone was displeased with the assault. Capone was a big fan of Lewis, whoever he was currently working for. But Capone, who once beat 2 of his own lieutenants to death with an Indian club, took no action against Jack McGurn. Capone viewed the assault in the same way a police officer might treat a noisy domestic dispute. It was a personal matter, and his own distaste was irrelevant. Capone did contribute $10,000 of his own money toward Lewis's hospital bills. The money more than covered the treatment. The surplus was to help Lewis get back on his feet. Capone could be generous like that when he wanted to be. He was one of those sentimental psychopaths. For a while, it looked as if Lewis wouldn't be able to speak at all. His singing voice was gone for good, but in time, Lewis recovered his speaking voice. He went back to work. He dropped the songs from his repertoire, but found he could still make people laugh. He appeared in clubs again. He featured in movies. He appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show. 9 years after he cut Joey Lewis's throat, Jack McGurn was something of a spent force in the underworld. He was virtually penniless and unprotected by the syndicates that had turned a blind eye to his early morning assault almost a decade previous. McGurn was shot dead by 3 gunmen whilst playing bowls at the Avenue recreational bowling alley. No one knew the identity of the murderers or who ordered the execution. Machine Gun Jack McGurn's great gift to Joey Lewis was a cut throat. Art Cohen wrote The Joker is Wild about Joey Lewis. It's doubtful he would have bothered had not Lewis got his throat cut and survived. Frank Sinatra played Lewis in the film version of the book. He'd been friends and drinking buddies with Lewis for a long time before that. It is unlikely that Sinatra would have bothered had Lewis not got his throat cut and survived. There was a dark and obvious continuity to Lewis and Sinatra, who had his own invisible contracts to negotiate with brand new lords of darkness. No one cut Sinatra's throat, but Sinatra was a more nimble dancer than Lewis ever was.